Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I used to think that if I stayed quiet long enough, eventually someone would notice the silence and ask me why. I used to think that if I just kept my head down, did everything right, followed every rule, and met every expectation, one day someone in my family would pull me aside and say, "We're proud of you, Rachel." We really are. But no one ever did. Instead, what I got was a rotating door of excuses, forgotten dates, and a growing collection of missed milestones that were always brushed off as bad timing or honest mistakes, when the truth was simpler, uglier, and harder to admit. I just wasn't the one they were waiting to celebrate. My sister Jessica was the loud one, the hurricane, the drama magnet, the bright burning center of every family gathering. She got into fights with boyfriends, changed her major 3 times, showed up to Thanksgiving in ripped leggings, and cried at the table because someone looked at her funny, and still, every time, our parents rushed in like first responders to wrap her in warmth, understanding, and 100 second chances. Meanwhile, I was the one who learned to drive myself to piano lessons, figured out FAFSA forms in the dark at 2 a.m., and taped my own prom corsage back together when it fell apart in the hallway. I didn't cause trouble, but I didn't attract attention either. That was the problem. I was background. I was support. I was the safe bet who never got picked. Graduation was supposed to be different. Not because I believed they'd suddenly change, I wasn't that naive anymore, but because for once, it was impossible to deny what I'd done. Valedictorian. Number 1 in my class. Full ride to a top school. Honors cords stacked like scarves around my neck. My name was printed on the program. The seat at the center of the stage was reserved for me. This wasn't some quiet personal victory that could be missed or glossed over. This was loud, official, public, the kind of thing that parents put in Christmas cards and brag about to old high school friends at the grocery store. So when I called my mom a few days before the ceremony, I half hoped, stupidly, childishly hoped, that for once, they'd come through. "Wait, when is your speech?" she asked, already distracted, fumbling with something in the background. I could hear Jessica's voice behind her, chattering about baby shower decorations. "Saturday," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "10 a.m. You have the invite. I mailed it a month ago." There was a pause. One of those long silences that feels like watching a slow leak in a tire, something hissing and shrinking under the surface. Then she sighed. "Oh, honey. Jess has her ultrasound that morning. The one where they find out the gender. She really wanted us there." I didn't speak right away, because anything I said would have come out brittle or broken, and I'd trained myself too long to keep those parts hidden. When I finally answered, my voice sounded thinner than I intended. "You can't reschedule an ultrasound?" "She's nervous," Mom said. "It's her first. You understand, right? This is a big deal for her." And there it was again, the invisible scale tipping out of balance, just like always. Her drama, her needs, her moment. Mine could wait. Mine could shrink. Mine could disappear. I hung up not because I was angry, that would have required surprise, but because I knew I couldn't carry the weight of both their absence and my own disappointment at the same time. The morning of graduation, I woke up before my alarm. I laid out my gown like armor, recited my speech in the mirror one last time, and walked into the auditorium with my shoulders squared like someone preparing for a job interview, not a celebration. The room buzzed with parents holding flowers, siblings with posters, proud dads in tucked-in shirts, moms with running mascara and oversized phones. My classmates waved, laughed, took selfies. And me, I found my assigned seat on stage, turned to glance at the audience, and zeroed in on the 3 empty chairs in the front row, still marked with my family's name. The usher came by twice, asking if someone would be joining me. I smiled too hard and said they were just running late. But they weren't. I knew that. I knew the ultrasound had come first. I could picture it vividly, the lights dimmed, the jelly on the belly, the flickering black and white screen, and my mother holding Jessica's hand like it was sacred. They were there for her reveal. I was alone for mine. As I sat waiting to be called up, I felt my stomach twist, not with nerves, but with the kind of clarity that hits you like cold water. The knowledge that nothing was going to change unless I changed it. I had spent my entire life hoping they'd see me. But the truth was, they had seen me. They just didn't care to stay. And when my name echoed through the auditorium and I walked up to that podium, I didn't open the leather folder with the speech I'd practiced. I left it shut. I took a breath, looked out into the audience, into all those faces, lit by pride and joy, and started speaking from the part of me that had been ignored the longest. The part that stopped asking. I'd like to dedicate this speech to the people who never believed in me. To the ones who thought being quiet meant I didn't have anything to say. To those who were always just a little too busy, a little too distracted, a little too late. You didn't build me. You didn't carry me. But you did teach me something important. You taught me that some things are worth doing even if no one claps for you. Especially then. There was a pause when I finished, just a heartbeat of stillness, and then the applause rolled in like thunder. People stood. Teachers cried. A kid from my biology class threw his fist in the air. But I didn't look at the crowd anymore. I looked straight at those 3 empty chairs, and smiled. Not because I won, but because I finally understood that their absence didn't define me. It revealed them. And that night, when the texts started rolling in, when the group chat exploded with, "What the hell was that?" and "You made your sister cry," I didn't reply. Because I wasn't their backup anymore. The applause didn't end when I stepped down from the podium. It followed me, like a slow-moving wave, all the way back to my seat on the stage, where I sat down with my back straight and my hands folded, pretending the tremor in my fingertips was just adrenaline and not 100 unspoken emotions trying to break through the dam I'd spent years building. I didn't cry, not then, not when my classmates reached out for high fives, not when the principal shook my hand with a glimmer in his eye that I hadn't seen in 4 years of silent hallways and late-night studying, not when Mrs. Rosen, my AP English teacher, mouthed the words "damn proud" from her seat beside the faculty row. I just smiled, nodded, and breathed in slowly through my nose as the moment, my moment, stretched and held like the last note of a song no one wanted to let go of. There was a clarity to the silence that followed. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but charged like the pause between lightning and thunder. I could feel the shift, even if I couldn't name it yet. Something had broken. Something had realigned. And deep down, I knew I'd just done something irreversible, not just to my family's carefully maintained illusion of closeness, but to the version of myself that had always tolerated being minimized, overlooked, rewritten in the margins of someone else's drama. After the ceremony, the courtyard flooded with bodies and voices and camera flashes. Classmates reunited with their families, hugged through tears, posed in front of banners and balloons, held bouquets that dripped petals onto the concrete. I watched it all from a distance, clinging to the one piece of stability I had, a cold bottle of water someone had handed me, while I scanned the crowd one last time for any sign of my family. But the 3 chairs had been right. They weren't there. And they weren't coming. I didn't linger. I thanked my teachers, declined a few invitations to join group photos, and walked home in my cap and gown because the idea of standing around waiting for someone who'd already made their choice felt like begging. I passed rows of cars filled with families laughing and loading up gifts, and when I finally reached my street, the sun had dipped low enough to stretch my shadow across the sidewalk like a second version of me, one that moved freely, that didn't flinch at the sound of my name, that didn't wait for validation that never arrived. When I opened the door to our house, the sound of laughter came from the kitchen, casual and content, like nothing had happened, like my entire academic career hadn't just culminated in the one event they all managed to miss. Jessica sat at the table, holding a cupcake with blue frosting. The kind they give you when the ultrasound tech tells you it's going to be a boy. My mother was taking pictures of her belly with one of those disposable cameras she always said she hated, but used anyway because they felt nostalgic. My father leaned against the fridge, holding a glass of wine and smiling like someone who had everything he needed right in front of him. They looked up when I entered, but none of them moved. No one rushed to hug me. No one said congratulations. No one even asked how it went. Jessica raised an eyebrow and said, "So, you really did that, huh?" And for a second, I couldn't tell if she was amused, hurt, impressed, or just annoyed that for once, the spotlight had turned. I dropped my bag by the stairs and said nothing. There was no need. The weight of the moment hung too heavy to touch. It wasn't a confrontation, not yet, more like a fragile truce that could be broken by a single wrong word. Later that evening, as I sat in my room scrolling through the tagged photos and videos that friends had posted, I came across a clip of my speech. It had been uploaded by someone's uncle, apparently a retired teacher from another district who had attended to see his niece graduate. The caption read, "Now this is a valedictorian speech." The video already had thousands of views. Comments ranged from heartfelt to furious, with strangers arguing over whether I had been brave or ungrateful, whether I had made a statement or burned a bridge. But one comment caught my eye more than the others. It was short. Just 5 words. She said what I couldn't. That night, just before midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a group message, the one my mother always used to send last-minute dinner reminders or weekend plans no one consulted me about. Her message was short, clipped, and utterly familiar in its passive-aggressive rhythm. "Mom, your sister is upset. What you said was unnecessary and hurtful. You've ruined her day." There was no mention of me. No congratulations. No acknowledgement of the years of work I'd poured into reaching that stage. Just a rebuke. A scolding for stealing attention. A reminder that in our house, Jessica's feelings were sacred and mine were optional. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to say anything at all. I didn't owe them an explanation for finally telling the truth. I didn't owe Jessica an apology for making her feel what I'd felt for years. And I didn't owe my mother the emotional labor of shrinking myself to preserve the comfort of her favorite child. So I put my phone on silent, turned off the lights, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, not angry, not sad, not even relieved, just still, as if something inside me had stopped spinning. And I thought about the speech again, not just the words, but the silence that followed, the moment when the auditorium had held its breath, when the air felt charged and something in the crowd shifted. That silence, I realized, was power. Not the kind you seize. The kind you grow into. Slowly. Quietly. Without needing permission. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is finally speak. And the most dangerous thing you can do is stop asking for permission to be seen. There's something strange that happens when you finally stop trying to prove yourself to people who have already decided not to see you. It's not quite liberation, and it's not quite grief, but something quieter, something heavier. Like suddenly realizing you've been shouting into a canyon and mistaking the echo for dialogue. That weekend, after the speech and the fallout and the silence that followed, I didn't speak to anyone in the house. Not because I was angry in the way people often imagine anger, raised voices, slamming doors, storming out with a suitcase and a dramatic one-liner, but because I had entered a different kind of stillness, one that wasn't passive or weak, but deliberate, sharpened by years of swallowing disappointment and finally having the appetite to be done with it. The house itself seemed to adjust to this new dynamic, as if even the walls had grown tired of the performance. Jessica avoided me, shuffling around with exaggerated sighs and dramatically slamming cabinet doors, performing victimhood with the grace of a seasoned actor, but none of the nuance. My mother, in her usual way, decided that the best course of action was to pretend everything was fine, offering half-hearted comments about the weather or asking if I wanted to join them for takeout, as if a lukewarm carton of pad thai could erase years of being overlooked and a week of emotional betrayal. My father remained a silent participant, a neutral statue passing through hallways and rooms like a man caught in someone else's drama and unwilling to declare allegiance. And I observed it all from a distance, not physically, because I still lived under that roof, but emotionally, mentally, from the vantage point of someone who no longer required their approval to define her worth. I poured myself into packing for college, organizing scholarship documents, preparing housing paperwork, filling out forms that confirmed, in tangible ways, that my life was moving forward with or without their applause. Every time I folded a shirt or crossed something off my list, I imagined placing one more invisible brick between myself and the girl I used to be, the girl who once cried because they missed her school play, who once rewrote an essay to make it sound more like what she thought they wanted to hear, who once sat in a bathroom stall on her birthday waiting for a message that never came. Then came the call. It was early evening, the kind of summer dusk where the air hangs heavy and the cicadas scream like sirens in the distance. I was in my room, editing a photo my friend had taken of me after the ceremony, one of the rare moments where I looked genuinely proud, chin high, eyes clear, when my phone rang. It was Jessica. I hesitated. The weight of history was in that pause, and if I'd answered without thinking, I might have slipped back into old habits. But I didn't. I answered because I was curious what version of reality she was spinning now, what new costumes she'd stitched together for this act. Her voice came through the line already trembling, thick with the kind of performative sorrow I'd heard before but no longer responded to. "Are you happy now?" she asked, without a hello. "You made me look like a joke in front of the entire town. People are texting me about your speech like I'm some villain. You humiliated me." I didn't answer right away. I could have said 100 things. I could have reminded her that the speech didn't name her, that the only people who heard guilt were the ones who already knew it lived in them. I could have said that if the truth sounded like humiliation, then maybe that said more about her than me. But I didn't. I let the silence do the speaking. Jessica continued, her voice catching on fake tears. "I didn't ask to be the favorite, Rachel. You're the one who always made everything so cold. You're the one who couldn't just go along with things." The absurdity of that statement almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how deeply she believed her own version of events, how completely she'd rewritten the past to fit a narrative where she was the misunderstood, sensitive sister and I was the bitter, ungrateful one who resented her for being loved. It was then I realized that nothing I said could ever penetrate that version of her, because she wasn't interested in reality. She was interested in comfort, in control, in keeping the dynamic intact. So I said only this: "You're upset because you finally heard what I've been living." There was a pause, and then the click of the call ending. No goodbye. No apology. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open, then slam, followed by the sound of the car starting in the driveway. Curious, I looked through the upstairs window and saw Jessica sitting in the passenger seat of Mom's car, curled up like a child, knees pulled to her chest, head pressed against the window. The engine was running, but the car didn't move. She was crying, or at least mimicking the posture of someone who was. I watched her for a long time, and what struck me most wasn't the spectacle of it. The drama was nothing new, but the utter stillness of the rest of the house. No one came out. No one ran to comfort her. No one tried to coax her back inside. It was as if the whole place had finally grown tired of the endless theater. My mother called from the hallway, her voice brittle and sharp. "Rachel, can you please go talk to her? She won't come inside." I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window overlooking the driveway. Jessica was still in the car, shoulders shaking, face pressed to the glass like some tragic figure in a play. But this time, the performance wasn't for me. I wasn't her audience anymore. Eventually, I heard the click of the car door locking from the inside, a sharp, deliberate sound, like punctuation at the end of a tired sentence. I took a sip of water, turned away from the window, and went back to my room. There was no guilt, no ache, just clarity, the kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from distance. From watching the people who used to hold your heart finally show you what they do with it when you stop offering it up for sacrifice. She stayed in that car for over an hour. And I never once opened the door. There's a moment in every story, even the ones you don't realize you've been telling yourself for years, when the plot can no longer sustain the lie, when the supporting characters reveal themselves as bystanders, and the main conflict stops pretending to be subtle. That moment came for me 3 days after the graduation speech, on a Monday that began, like most of them, with quiet avoidance and the gentle hum of a house trying to return to normal, as if emotional wreckage could be swept under the rug with a load of laundry and a passive-aggressive breakfast. But something had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the slow weight of accumulated history finally tipping the scale. I wasn't waiting anymore, not for recognition, not for reconciliation, and certainly not for the hollow apologies that tend to come when people realize the one who stayed silent has finally started speaking. I spent most of that morning packing in deliberate silence, folding my clothes with a precision that felt less about neatness and more about control. As if the simple act of stacking shirts and rolling socks could create some kind of order in a world where love had always come with conditions and loyalty had always been contingent on invisibility. The college acceptance packet sat on the edge of my desk like a trophy no one in the house acknowledged, a symbol of escape that neither inspired pride nor triggered celebration, but instead hung in the air like an inconvenience no one wanted to discuss. Something too sharp to be ignored, but too uncomfortable to praise. It was during that process, while searching the basement for an old suitcase, that I found the thing I hadn't even known I was looking for. The box was unmarked, tucked beneath a pile of unused holiday decorations and a folded ping-pong table no one had touched in years. It wasn't particularly hidden, but it had clearly been placed where no one expected or wanted to revisit it. I opened it out of idle curiosity, not expecting much, maybe some old ornaments or expired photo paper, but what I found instead was a carefully organized collection of family scrapbooks, thick with dust, but pristinely assembled, labeled by year, bound in identical full-leather covers in varying shades of forest green and navy blue. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and opened the first one, a yearbook of memories preserved with care, my sister's first haircut, her ballet recital at 5, her birthday parties, her Halloween costumes, her first day of middle school, her softball games, her prom, her graduation. Page after page of Jessica, frozen in time, smiling from every glossy print, surrounded by captions in my mother's careful cursive, our star, can't believe she's growing up so fast, proud mom moment. At first, I thought maybe the next volume would be more balanced, that I was just starting with the one that happened to lean more toward her, but as I flipped through book after book, year after year, the pattern remained Jessica front and center, over and over, like the protagonist of a story in which I had apparently never existed. There were maybe 4 or 5 pictures of me across the entire collection, and even those felt accidental, a blurry image of me in the background at Jessica's birthday, a cropped photo where only half my face appeared. One group shot from Christmas where my expression looked distant, like I already knew. There was no record of my science fair, no photo from the regional spelling bee I won in 7th grade, no image of me in my band uniform, standing at attention with the rest of the drumline. No caption that said, "Rachel made us proud today." No moment frozen in time that said, "We saw her." I sat there for a long time, not crying, not even shaking, just holding the weight of that discovery in my lap like something sacred and decaying, because it's one thing to suspect you've always been an afterthought, and another entirely to see it confirmed in ink and image, documented so thoroughly that you can't even convince yourself to deny it anymore. The truth wasn't just in what was there, it was in what wasn't. It was in the blank spaces, in the absence of memory, in the silence of pages that should have been filled but weren't. I closed the box and didn't bother putting it back. I left it sitting out on the ping-pong table, right in the open, a quiet dare to anyone who might notice. But no one said a word. My mother walked past it twice that evening and didn't even glance in its direction. My father asked if I needed help with packing, but didn't ask what I'd found. Jessica stayed in her room, the door closed, occasionally blasting sad songs like some kind of public penance. The house, once again, chose silence. But I didn't. Not anymore. I started making changes, small ones at first, but deliberate. I logged into the family phone plan account, something I'd never been allowed to touch, and filed a request to remove myself as a user, choosing a new carrier with my own account and a new number that only a few people would have. I canceled the autopay I'd been running for Netflix, which had been charged to my card for over a year even though my name had never once appeared on the user profiles. I updated my mailing address for every college form, unsubscribed my parents' email from all university communication, and rerouted my scholarship notifications to a new inbox they didn't have access to. I removed the shared Google Calendar events, wiped the shared drive we used for family planning, and changed the passwords on the streaming accounts I'd created, but had been quietly shared with relatives who never said thank you. None of it was loud. None of it required confrontation. It was the kind of revenge that doesn't scream, it just removes itself. And in its absence, it reveals how much it was holding together. The final act, the one I debated for an hour before finally doing it, came late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of unspoken history pressed against my chest like a ghost refusing to leave. I opened the family group chat, the same thread where birthday wishes flew like confetti for Jessica, where I had once sent a picture of my acceptance letter and received a single thumbs up in return, and I typed one line. I thought you might want to know I got the full ride. I move in next week. That was it. No flourish. No bitterness. Just a fact. I didn't stay to read the replies. I muted the chat, deleted the shortcut, and powered off my phone. I didn't need to see what they would say, because I already knew the responses wouldn't be about me. They would be about the disruption, about the discomfort of a system that no longer functioned the way they expected, about the quiet girl who finally decided not to play her part. And upstairs, while they read my message in their separate rooms, I sat by the window, staring into the night, knowing that sometimes the things you can't unsee aren't the photographs themselves, they're the years in between. The empty chairs. The birthday candles never lit. The silence that was never accidental. I used to think that closure would arrive in some grand, unmistakable moment, a final confrontation, perhaps, or a handwritten letter of apology, or even just a long, overdue conversation where each side admitted their failures and their blind spots and promised, in good faith, to try better moving forward. But the truth, the quieter and harder truth, is that most closure doesn't come like that at all. It comes in fragments, in sideways glances, in decisions made without announcements, in the gradual withdrawal of emotional oxygen from a place that never offered you much air to begin with. And when it does arrive, it doesn't feel like fireworks or absolution. It feels like driving past a house you used to cry in and realizing you don't need to turn in the driveway anymore. I didn't say goodbye to anyone the morning I left. There was no breakfast send-off, no family photo by the car, no arms flung around me with misty eyes and whispered hopes for success. I had packed my things the night before, loading the suitcases into the trunk myself in the quiet dark, my movements deliberate, not rushed, because I didn't want to owe anyone even the courtesy of borrowed time. My father had nodded at me the evening before and said, "Drive safe," in the same tone he used to talk about weather or gas prices. My mother had hovered by the pantry long enough to ask if I needed snacks for the road, not because she remembered what I liked, but because offering food was the only language she had left when the emotional terrain got too complicated. Jessica didn't speak to me at all, though I heard her pacing in her room until almost 2 in the morning, her footsteps shallow and restless, like someone trying to summon drama without direction. The car ride itself was uneventful in the most comforting way imaginable. I played a playlist I'd built over the years, songs I used to listen to while doing homework at the kitchen table while chaos unfolded around me, songs that had been background noise to long nights of isolation, songs that now, suddenly, sounded like anthems of quiet rebellion. With every mile that passed, I felt the static of that house begin to loosen its grip, the grip of a family that had built itself around one narrative, Jessica at the center, everyone else rotating, and punished anyone who dared disrupt that fragile gravity. But fate, or whatever you want to call the strange choreography of timing, had one last scene to stage before I could fully drive away. As I passed the church at the edge of town, the one where we used to attend Easter services and reluctantly pose for photos we never framed, I noticed the parking lot was full, the curb lined with pastel balloons and folding tables draped in pink and blue. Jessica's baby shower, the event that had, in one form or another, been the axis around which the entire month had spun. I hadn't been invited, of course, though I had known the date from my mother's offhand mention in the hallway days earlier, spoken more like a scheduling update than a celebration. I hadn't planned to stop, hadn't even intended to look, but something pulled my gaze, just for a second, and in that second, I saw her. Jessica was sitting alone in the front seat of her car, parked crookedly at the edge of the lot, her hands clenched around the steering wheel, her shoulders hunched in that particular way that told me, without sound, without question, that she was crying again. No one stood beside her. No one knocked on the window. Inside the church, the celebration continued without her laughter, streamers, the occasional screech of tape being torn and stuck to a wall. People were moving on. People were enjoying themselves. But Jessica wasn't inside. She was in the car, crying. Just like that night in our driveway. Just like every time she realized that the attention she'd grown so used to commanding no longer came unconditionally. And for a moment, I wondered if I should stop, not because I felt guilt or obligation or even pity, but because some deep, rusted part of me still held the echo of the old script, the one where I was the peacemaker, the fixer, the girl who absorbed everyone else's emotions like a sponge and wrung herself out in private later. I wondered if I should walk over, knock on the glass, ask what was wrong, offer a word of comfort even if I knew it would be twisted into ammunition by nightfall. But then, just as quickly, I realized I didn't have to. That I didn't need to be her emotional mop anymore. That whatever pain she was experiencing, whatever realization had cracked through the surface of her carefully curated life, it wasn't mine to soothe. Not this time. Maybe not ever again. So I kept driving. The road opened up before me, stretching long and empty and full of possibility, the kind of possibility that doesn't shout, but hums quietly under your skin like a long-forgotten melody returning. The town receded in my rearview mirror, and with it, the weight of years spent waiting to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved in the way I'd always given so freely and so thanklessly. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt, finally, like myself. I didn't know what would happen next. College would come with its own challenges, its own sharp edges, its own brand of loneliness and reinvention. But it would be mine. My choices, my silence, my voice. I wasn't walking away from a family. I was walking toward a life. And as the last sliver of that church disappeared behind the curve of the hill, I took one long, steady breath, rolled down the window, and let the wind hit my face, not as a symbol, not as a metaphor, but as a simple, physical truth. I didn't need to go back. I didn't need to be rescued. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone who still believed that love should be earned like a trophy on a shelf. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to win anyone over. I was just leaving. And the car, the one she was crying in, was still running, but mine was already gone.